Hey everyone, it's Dr. Andy from Twin Cities Movement and Surefooted. I'm here to talk a little bit about hip extension today. So we're just going to cover a few drills that we like to use to kind of offset what happens when we spend a lot of time in chairs, in cars, in couches, things like that, where we are in this position here, 90 degrees there, with both legs and not really utilizing any other muscle tone. So, I mean, we're not talking about a squat here where we're in this position. We're talking about sitting in a chair. So we're not really using our glutes. We're not really using a lot of things. We end up shortening our hip flexors when this happens, and then that kind of gets in the way of hip extension. This is a problem because when you're walking, you need to extend your hips. I mean, when you're standing, you need to extend your hips. When you are doing running, when you're cycling, you need to be able to extend your hips. If you can't extend your hips all the way, then you're getting into your low back or you're getting into your knees, and this is where knee pain and low back pain can potentially come from. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a routine that I like to do. So we're going to start with the rad center ball. So this is inflatable. This is not a really solid and really painful thing. It's really good for abdominal release, kind of good for intestinal motility and things like that, but I really like to use it for mobilizing the hip flexors, rolling them out a little bit. There are certainly more aggressive things that you can do for this, but I prefer to be a little bit gentler. There's a lot of, important structures in this area. So I'll demonstrate that first. What I'm going to do is just lie on the ball and roll around. I mean, it's really simple. So I'm already in a fair amount of hip extension here, and then I can bring myself into varying degrees of hip extension and low back extension and roll around, trying to get the iliopsoas and the other structures that limit hip extension to open up a little bit. 30 to 60 seconds each side, really not a lot. If there's pain, you do not have to do this. This is not an essential part of it, but I like to sometimes. It feels good sometimes. Now that I've kind of woken up the tissue, we can move on to the next step. And so now we're going to get into a half kneeling position here. Now this is stretching out this hip flexor. So what I'm going to do is stack myself knee, hip, shoulder, ear, nice and tall here. And then I'm going to squeeze my butt. And then there's a rope right at my belt, and I'm going to let that pull me forward just a little bit. So very small pulses. We're not going into it like this, because then we're getting into our low back. There's no point in doing this anymore. We're looking for a little bit of a pull right here in the front pocket area, maybe into the stomach, maybe into the thigh. Either one of those is all right. We're going to do 10 pulses. Let me do the other side. Good. Next thing I'm going to do is use stick mobility stick. This, you can use a dowel, you can use a broomstick, you can use a shelf, many things. I just have a lot of stick mobility sticks, so that's what I'm going to use. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to be squeezing my butt and pressing down into the floor with the stick and lifting up the other foot. Probably easier if I use the other hand, then I have this base of support here and lift up. And nice thing about this is it's hip disassociation. I'm extending one hip while I'm flexing the other. Terminal hip flexion in a nice controlled manner like this. 10 per side. Actively pulling down on the stick, so I'm not just kind of hanging on the stick. I'm actively pulling down, so that's helping to irradiate the rest of my tissue. I'm helping the hip extension and the hip flexion by utilizing the rest of the kind of the muscle engagement. So 10 of those. Good. And then last thing I'm going to do is in a standing position, I'm going to bring my knee up and hold it here, kind of nice and relaxed, making sure that my other knee is locked out so that my butt is squeezed. The left foot is the one that I'm working on here, and bring my arms out and hold for 10. Okay, then I'm going to do the other side. Bring my leg up, lock out my knee, and hold for 10. Good. And if you want to do that one more time, what you can do is, instead of just holding it there, you can actively try and pull it up even more. Try and get the hips as far apart from each other as you possibly can. Rather the knees, as far apart from each other as you possibly can. So here we go. Pretty decent challenge there. We'll try the other side. And this will be more embarrassing probably. All right, so that was a little routine that we like to do for hip extension. So offsetting sitting, offsetting driving, offsetting any amount of non-optional stationary positions that you need to get into. And this actually includes standing too, because when most of us stand, we're probably going to dump into this position a little bit, because this is an easier way to hold ourselves up than actively engaged with our pelvis underneath our rib cage.